Was Noah the first ever doomsday prepper? I've been waiting for this episode for a very long time. This is episode 777 of the Ready Your Future podcast, where I connect you with resources that will help you prepare for a better future. It's all about loving your people, getting prepared, and living free. Hey, I'm Todd Sepulveda, a regular guy living in the suburbs who understands the need to be better prepared for the future. Hey guys, are you looking to up your preparedness knowledge in 2023? Don't spend time bouncing around the internet for the very best preparedness content. Instead, sign up for the top preparedness articles and get them right in your email. For $5 a month, you can get the top preparedness articles from around the internet sent to your email weekly. You can choose to read them or drop them in the Pocket app and have them read to you as you go about your day. The Buy Me a Coffee link to the top preparedness articles is in the show notes. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Ready Your Future podcast. I'm so glad that you're hanging out with me, especially on this one. Like I said, I've been waiting for this one for a very long time. The number 7 is an important one for me. And then the fact that it's 777, well, it had to be a special one. So I've been working on this one for a little bit. Hey, before we jump into the episode, I know that if you've been following me for a little bit, I've been listening to Little House in the Big Woods. It's one of those books that my 5th grade teacher read to everyone. Actually, she read all the Little House on the Prairie books. And just recently, it had kind of come up and I just on a whim bought it, started listening to it. And I just kind of report back after listening to a chapter every week. And so I wanted to share this one is called Going to Town. This chapter is called Going to Town. And this is the first book of, Little House on the Prairie series by Laura Ingalls Wilder. It's called Little House in the Big Woods. So anyway, this chapter is called Going to Town, and just some really simple things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just some really simple things. The girls, Laura and Mary, and then there's another little baby. I can't remember her name right now. They've never been to town, right? And so that they're young, but it's still they've never been to town. And so Paul announces that they're going to go to town, and it's a really big deal for them. Like they go out and, they get a bath. Mom does her hair, does their hair in the special way and puts on bonnets and all this kind of stuff. And they go, and it's just an event, right? And so for me, and there's a lot that goes into it. They get a little piece of candy, and Mom and Pa are in the store bartering and all that kind of stuff. They go to, the store or the town is set on a lake, and there's a lot of sand and all that good stuff. So, it's all interesting there. But the thing that always strikes me about this is just the simple life and how the simple things, get the kids interested or get them excited. Nowadays, if a kid doesn't have a Nintendo Switch in their hand, or they don't have a phone or whatever it might be, if they're not entertained going, wherever, it's not that, it's a big deal actually. So, they go nuts. A lot of the times we give them those things in the vehicles because we don't want to be, we want to hear the fighting and all that kind of stuff. When Laura and her sister are going to town, they're paying attention to the wildlife. They're looking at, they see rabbits, they see deer, they see all this stuff going down. And so, I remember that being a kid as well, although I did fight with my brother as well. Some good memories about fights on trips. But anyway, it's the simple things, right? And so how important those things are, and then the memories that those things make. If your family ever sits around just kind of chatting about old times and is a lot of the times it's just the small details in the memories, right? Or the memories that come up. It's not like, oh, you remember that time we took that big old trip, and it's like, you remember when Grandpa was doing this, or you remember in the backyard when you were a kid. It's always those simple things that we tend to remember. So that's what stood with me, or stuck with me, I guess is a better term to use there on that. So listen, if you are listening to this podcast, more than likely you like listening to audio type recordings. And so Audible, if you're not a member of Audible, then you're really missing out. So if you go over to audiopreps.com, you can become a member of Audible, get some free books while you're at it. And I have list of books that might be interesting for you if you want to look into preparedness, and then other books that I've been listening to. I really need to update it because I've been listening to a lot of other books, not necessarily preparedness related, but other books that are just interesting. So anyway, if you go over to audiopreps.com, you can find Little House in the Big Woods there, and then a link to Audible if you haven't connected over there, and that would be a really good thing. If you like, audio podcasts and audiobooks, it really would be a good thing. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward with this episode. So this episode is, again, called Noah. Was Noah the first doomsday prepper? Now, here's the thing. If you've been listening to me for any amount of time, if you read any of my articles, you know that I hate the term doomsday preppers. And I hate what that kind of did to the whole preparedness community, right? People that are legit people in the preparedness community that are still out there, still writing, still have blogs, still doing videos, were featured on there, and they made them look really crazy. It made preppers look really crazy, and doomsday. They made them pick like one doomsday event. Although the people that were on there are probably just regular preppers, just preparing for whatever might happen, hurricane, tornado, blizzard. They had them pick one major thing that they were kind of focused on. And more than likely, they probably didn't give them a whole lot of choice because they tried to spread it out so people would have different doomsday events. But when I think about Noah and when I think about what he really went through, that truly was doomsday. I mean, that really was doomsday for him. So he was a doomsday prepper. He was getting ready for that. So listen, this is going to be kind of a different type of podcast, I guess, here, because I'm going to be talking a little bit more faith-based. I'm going to read some scripture, not a lot of it, but I want to give a little bit of the story. So if you're not familiar with it, or you haven't heard it in a long time, maybe some things that you didn't realize, I want to point some things out. But then I'm going to talk about 10 reasons why Noah was a prepper. So there's going to be that Noah aspect, but then really relating it back to preparedness and where we are today. So it's going to, even if you're not a person of faith, it's still going to be relevant to you. But you're going to have to get through the scripture and stuff like that. I know a lot of people always tell me, Todd, don't apologize for reading scripture. And I'm not apologizing. I'm just letting you know ahead of time what you can have in store here for this one. So the story of Noah is in the Bible, and it spans from Genesis chapter 6 through chapter 10. And so that is the very first book of the Bible, and it spans those chapters. I'm going to be looking at chapter 6 through 8, and I'm only going to be reading certain little verses of it before we actually jump into the 10 reasons why Noah was a prepper. So then I'm going to start out with chapter 6 and starting with verse 13. Like I said, I'm only going to just do a couple of verses here. So let's start with verse 13. Then God said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. And behold, I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make the ark with rooms and shall cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits, its breadth, 50 cubits, and its height, 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark and finish it to a cubit from the top, and set the door of the ark in the side of it. You shall make with it lower, second, and third decks. Behold, I am bringing the flood of water upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life. From under heaven, everything that is on the earth shall perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every kind into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds after their kind, and of the animals after their kind, of every creeping thing of the ground after its kind, 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. As for you, take for yourself some of all food which is edible, and gather it to yourself, and it shall be for food for you and for them." Thus Noah did according to all that God had commanded him, so he did. So there is a video, and I think I've mentioned it before. It's called In the Beginning. I actually found it on YouTube. So it's just In the Beginning. It's the story of Genesis. and it starts with Adam and Eve, and it goes all the way through. But I was looking at the story of Noah again, and Noah kind of seems like a kind of a kooky guy, right? But anyway, so you can go check that one out. And you notice here that there are, God gives them this humongous ark to build. I mean, it is huge. If, there's replicas of it, and it's just like, it's amazing to think that, back in that day that they built something so big that was able to withstand. And as long as it withstood. The other thing is like there's 3 floors here, right? 3 levels, and there was rooms inside of them. A lot of the times when you look at videos or you look at movies, right? Like the Russell Crowe movie is like so unbiblical. It is not even funny. There's like the only thing biblical about it was he was called Noah and there was an ark, and that was it. The animals come in and he has some kind of weed that he, puts them to sleep and whatever. Well, you're going to see how long the animals would have had to quote unquote be asleep if that was the case. But anyway, that's just very. I hated that movie, but it's Hollywood. What are you gonna say? So here you go. You have this now. One of the things that people assume if you ever grew up going to Sunday school or anything like that, you sing the Noah song. They went in 2 by 2. But there's a little bit more to the story here. So I'm going to go to Genesis chapter 7. I'm going to jump to chapter 7 and start with verse 2. It says, "You shall take with you of every clean animal by sevens, a male and his female, and of the animals that are not clean, 2, a male and his female." So a lot of the times we think is like 2 by 2, right? 2 elephants, a male and a female, 2 giraffes, a male and a female. But no, there was 7 of the clean animals, and the animals that they could, eat, and the ones that they were okay to eat by, according to what God would give them. But the other animals that were unclean, then they were to only bring 2 on. The other thing, and we read that in chapter 6, is they were to come to Noah. Noah didn't have to go find all these animals. He's putting together the ark, right? That would have been a really crazy thing to have to go find all the animals. You would have missed some. But anyway, you have the 7 of the clean animals and the 2 of the other animals. So he says, okay, verse 3, "Also of the birds of the sky by 7, male and female, to keep offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For after 7 more days, I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will blot out from the face of the land every living thing that I have made." So it was going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights, but that wasn't all the time that they were on the ark, and that's really important. Now, this next verse, I'm going to jump to verse 6. This one's really important as well. Now Noah was 600 years old when the flood of water came upon the earth. Jumping to verse 16, "Those that entered, male and female of all flesh, entered as God had commanded him, and the Lord closed it behind him." So God was intervening here. God was helping out, bringing the animals, but God also closed this big door, the door that was on the side. He closed it behind Noah and his family. All right, I'm going to go ahead and skip all the rest of it and jump to verse 8, verse 2 in chapter 8. "Also the fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained, and the water receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of 150 days the water decreased." Okay, so it rained 40 days, 40 nights. We're talking about another 150 days where the water was decreasing. Then in the 7th month, on the 17th day, this is verse 4 of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. The water decreased steadily until the 10th month. So it hasn't been raining. They're sitting in the ark another 3 months while it's kind of rested on the mount there. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the top of the mountains became visible. All right. So they're rested there. They're kind of lodged in there, but the mountains are still not visible up until the 10th month, right? Verse 6, "Then it came about at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made." All right, I'm going to jump down to verse 13. "Now it came about," listen, "in the 601st year, in the 1st month, on the 1st of the month, the water was dried up from the earth. Then Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the surface of the ground was dried up. In the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. Then God spoke to Noah, saying, 'Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you.'" All right. That's all I'm going to read there for the scripture verses. But I hope you got that. It was almost over a year that Noah was in the ark. And that's crazy when you think about what they had to do to prepare and all the things that you don't read about in the Bible. Like, what did they do with, all the animal poop, right? What did they do with that? How did they store all the food for a year? What did they do for water? Did they just, throw a bucket out and grab some water? I mean, what did they do there? There's all these things that you really need to consider and to think about when how do they cook their food? All those different things when they're sitting in that ark, right? So when you think about Noah, and he was a doomsday prepper, he really had to consider all these things. And I mean, he wasn't told how long he was going to be in the ark. He wasn't told, he wasn't given a whole lot of specifics other than the dimensions of the ark and how things were going to go there. So that's really important, when we think about planning and we think about being prepared and all that good stuff. So let's jump into 10 reasons why Noah was a prepper. So here's number 1. Noah was warned by God of a coming flood and prepared for it by building an ark to save himself and his family. So if you think about where he was building, he wasn't building anywhere near an ocean. It wasn't like, go build this next to the ocean, I'm going to push you into the ocean. Nothing like that. He's building this on dry land. One of the things I like, I can't remember which Bible movie it was about Noah, where he starts out and there's a lot of woods around him. And then as he continues on, like the woods are just like, they wind up just being all used up, right? He uses every piece of wood around him. In that one video about in the beginning, people are making fun of him. He's like, why are you building an ark? I mean, there's no boat, there's no water around here and all that kind of stuff. So normalcy bias is very powerful, right? It causes us to believe something different than the norm, than what's normal that can happen, right? So it's like, it's very hard for me to believe that someone would rob me. It's very hard for me to believe that there really is going to be shortages. Like every time I go to the grocery store, I see everything I want. I was talking to one of my friends, one of my coworkers, and they've been driving around another vehicle for a couple of weeks. One that has been that the dealership is allowing them to use because the parts for their vehicle hasn't come in, and so that's I guess a blessing for them. But that's the thing; it's the shortages there, and so it's really hard sometimes to think, no, that's not really going to be the place. But he didn't give in to that because he trusted God a little bit more there. So normalcy bias can paralyze us, and it's really important to understand that things can happen. There are things out there, just because we've always experienced them this way, we need to make sure that that doesn't paralyze us from making a move some way into preparedness. Noah was also very logical and realistic. All right, he was logical and realistic to trust that what God was saying. Some people would say, well, was that really God, or did I, eat some really bad salsa the night before? And that was just kind of like my imagination, telling me all these different dimensions and things like that. Was that a dream? He was a person who was very familiar with God, and he understood God's voice, and he had no reason to doubt. So when God comes in and is like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and speak this to you, that's really important for us because we need to be very logical and realistic as well. There's a lot logical and realistic that we need to be prepared for what's out there, but logical and realistic to some of the things that are out there that get promoted in the preparedness community isn't what we really should be hanging on to. I mean, you've heard me talk about this often, right? Those YouTube channels that like the world's ending this week. It's like, stop listening to those people. That's not logical. That's not realistic. There's been, and I've said this before, like people have been talking about like we were going to be starving, already. We should have been starving last fall, and now we're going to starve this spring, and then we're all these things. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be shortages, and I'm not going to say I'm not saying that there's not going to be pain. But be careful with, the people that are speaking, and they're throwing all this information that is not always very realistic. I think what we're going to see more than anything is things are going to get really expensive. And so we might not be able to buy the things we're used to because things will be expensive. So as preppers, we see signs all around us, right? If you can't see the craziness in the world right now, you don't want to see them. And that's just plain and simple. There's so many things going on. And sometimes we need to get out of just our own little, local situation and where we are in our own city and in our own state. There is craziness all over the world. And we can look into, start looking for those people that you trust that talk about things that are happening in other parts of the world. So things are happening all the time. Do research, not just the mainstream media. Like if you like just listen, you're just listening to CNN or even Fox News, that's not where you want to be. But on the other hand, don't go to those wackadoo websites either. It used to be back in the day, like when the internet was kind of like really ramping up, you could tell the wackadoo websites. And it seemed like they were just put together just like one page, and they would have like little spinning things and things that would flash. And like someone who didn't know anything about design would throw things up there and it's like, oh, hey, this kind of looks cool and stuff like that. And it just was one long page of information. And it would just, the aliens are coming, whatever it might be. You could tell those wackadoo websites. Nowadays, it's really easy to put together a really nice looking website, and even the wackadoos can make it seem, really legit. So you can't go by that anymore. So you really need to do your research and be up to speed on what is going on. So if you're not a believer, I'm one that believes in praying and seeking the Lord and knowing what is coming in that way. But trust your gut. Maybe you need to just trust your gut and go on past experiences. Has your gut been right before, or do you tend more to the worry side of things? If you tend more to the worry side of things and nothing has ever happened, maybe you dial that back just a little bit. Talk to people who are rational and that you trust their opinion. That's one reason why I think the exclusive email group is so powerful, is because people can come with all these ideas that they have and then kind of throw it out there, and people will be very reasonable there, and share information. And then you can take that information and then do with it what you think is right in your local situation. Make moves that make sense, right? It might not make sense for you to buy a bunker. Go out and buy it. It might not make sense for you there, but it might make a whole lot of sense to put together a food storage program and know how to rotate it and put together some water that you can have, those different kinds of things. So make moves that make sense and that you're going to be able to use. All right. Number 2, why Noah was a doomsday prepper. God had given Noah a plan for survival, and he followed through with it. Noah had the plans for the ark, right? He knew how big it was going to be. He knew how many levels. He knew that it had to have a door, that it had to have a window. He had plans. Now, God didn't give him, at least it's not written in the Bible, the specific plans for, the food, the type of, how are you going to store water? What are you going to do with animal waste? What are you going to do with human waste? All those different kinds of things. He didn't have that per se, but he could use just his logic and what he had in experience to be able to go from there. But I'm sure there was many nights after working all day long on the ark where they had to come back and say, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get rid of waste? How are we going to, take care of our water? How are we going to do this? They had a plan for that. So when God comes and says, hey, you have 7 days, in 7 days, I'm going to start bringing the water down. It wasn't like, okay, oh my gosh, 7 days, what are we going to do? They already had a plan in place. So as preppers, trying to prep without a plan is a big, big mistake, right? And I've talked about that many, many times. Prepping without a plan is a huge mistake. It would have been really bad if God told Noah, build an ark, and he built a 30-foot boat, right? Instead of having all the room for the animals. So you need to have a plan for what you're preparing for. If you don't have a plan, you're going to spend a ton of money and not be prepared with what you truly need. You're going to buy this, you're going to buy that, you're going to buy this. And then it's going to be something as simple as, man, I wish I had a lantern when a blackout comes, right? It's like, I don't even have a decent lantern. All I have is, this one flashlight or whatever, but I have all this other, I have firearms and armor and all this other stuff, ready to go. So you really need to be prepared with what you truly need. You'll create a ton of holes in your preparedness if you don't prepare purposefully. And that's one of those things that is just, if you are new to preparedness, if you've been in it for just a little bit of time, I wish someone would have told me that way back then. And I wish they would have told me how to do it. Talked about that many times about how to prepare and look at your situation. You need to develop a plan just for your situation. There's not a one size fits all for preparedness. When you look on the internet and it's like, hey, buy this bug out bag with all this stuff in there, that is not a one size fits all. There might be some cool stuff, and if you want to do that, more power to you. But just know that that might not be prepared just for you. So you really need to develop a plan just for your situation, just for your family, and you need to make sure that you stay on track with that plan. So when things go sideways, you know exactly what to do because you've already planned for it. Reason number 3 why Noah was a doomsday prepper: he wasn't afraid to ask for help. Noah enlisted the help of his whole family. They didn't prepare the ark and all their supplies in one weekend. So again, his sons were helping to build, the wives, the daughter-in-laws were helping out. The wife was helping out. One of the things that a lot of people don't always consider is while they're building the ark, they still had to grow crops and stuff. I mean, they're not going to Walmart or ordering from Amazon Prime. They still had to grow crops. They still had to make sure that they had vegetables and fruit and all that stuff to eat, right? So that when they do get into the ark, they can go ahead and go there. So it's not only they had to eat, for what they needed, but they needed to grow for the future and then have seed for planting when the ark finally, when the water receded. So he had help from a lot of people. Now, prepping alone is not ideal. I have talked about that for a long time. When I first started in preparedness, the idea was, the lone prepper, you would go out into the woods and survive and that kind of stuff. My thing was like, okay, I already have a family. How is that going to work? Right. And then it's like, okay, the family will, circle the wagons and you put, you black out your windows. And so, when the zombies come, you can, they'll pass your house up because it looks like it's, completely abandoned and there's nothing there. And it looks like it's looted, throw some stuff on the front yard so it looks like it's already looted. Dude, that doesn't work either, right? Because, somebody eventually is going to come in and they're going to find you. And then what are you going to do? You and your family, right? Against a whole mob. That doesn't make sense. You need others. You just need other people to help survive. So bringing your family along, if possible, right? I know that there's a lot of people that are solo preppers out there, but bringing your family along, if it's possible, bringing close friends along, if it's possible, getting connected online, if there's no one else that you can connect. People are so worried about, oh my gosh, I'm going to, if people know that I'm a prepper, that I'm going to give away all my secrets and that's it. Listen, go back and listen to episode 770. And I did that one with Mick and Brian. We talked about community preparedness, and you can go back and do that. And I really believe that if you're a believer, it would be really, really easy to find people that would believe you're, in the preparedness mindset, or at least that they understand it and would accept it. And I even created, the small group resource is Preparedness Biblical. You can do that and then invite people over to do a small group and see how people respond to that. You don't even have to tell them you're a prepper. Just, how do people respond? If people are like, oh, this is weird stuff, preppers, ha, 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 yeah, that's somebody you don't want to confide in. But if other people are showing interest, it's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to store food. It makes a lot of sense to store water. It makes a lot of sense to have a plan and all this, all the other things that I talk about in that small group resource, then you know who you can build on. So, sometimes churches, I think, are very favorable to it. I know, like Mick, if you go back and listen to 770, Mick's church is very open to it. There's a lot of churches that are not, but that doesn't mean that there's not people out there that would be as well. So you need to reach out and start trusting people. Again, go back and listen to 770. Doesn't mean you give away all your preparedness and all your preps and where you store everything, but you need to start reaching out to other people and build that relationship, because preparedness and surviving and being able to, get through an event is so much easier if you have others with you. Reason number 4 that Noah was a doomsday prepper is he gathered and stored food supplies on the ark to sustain himself and the animals during the flood. And we all know that was for over a year, right? I mean, just think about how all of that. So it wasn't just food for himself and his family. It was food for all the animals. And when I think about that, that's just absolutely crazy right there. So think about how there wasn't a lot of other gear. Like we talk about like all the other gear that we need. We need solar panels and we need this and we need that. And of course, they didn't have solar panels back then. But for them, it was the basics that were very important, right? They needed that food. They needed that water. They needed a way to get rid of waste somehow, right? So there wasn't a lot of other gear that Noah was focused on. Food was the most important. Water is the most important. They had shelter and then probably light and heat. And somehow they had to be able to, cook and do things, in the ark. And I can't remember what movie there was that they had like a little fire pit inside. It was kind of interesting with that. And so, I mean, there definitely would have been ways to do that. But he gathered supplies, right? He knew that was necessary, just like we understand that it's very necessary to have supplies. And sometimes we need to make sure that we don't go crazy with all the, the fluff out there, all the things that are sold in preparedness world. We need to make sure that we have the basics really set in stone. So reason number 5 why Noah was a doomsday prepper, he built an ark for others and was able to preserve the lives of all the animals on the ark, showcasing his ability to manage resources and plan for the needs of others. So again, Noah wasn't given a whole lot of information how to prepare. He had to think through his plans and he needed to have a strategy. And so again, I kind of imagine every night, around the fire with the family, talking about, hey, this, we need to consider this and we need to think about this and how are we going to do this? And so they had a plan, they had a strategy for moving forward. So as preppers, we prep for our families too. And many times they don't appreciate it. I mean, your spouse might be okay with prepared. They might like, okay, it's a fad or it's a hobby. It's your thing, right? They don't completely understand it. I know that during, when COVID was going on, a lot of people were, I heard from a lot of people that were saying, my wife finally gets it. My husband finally gets it. They appreciate that I've been stocking up toilet paper, I've been stocking up this, or I've been stocking up that, and they see the benefit of it. Hopefully that hasn't gone away as we have been, things have, I guess, opened up and the stores are still, full, and all the shortages that people say that would have been coming by now are, haven't really hit. So hopefully they still appreciate all of that. But we do it because we love them, right? We do it because we love them. We care about them. We know that hard times are coming, and it would be really smart to have all these things laid out. So the other side of this is you might not want to, but the reality of it is that there will be people that you wouldn't be able to turn your back on. So many people will say, I'm preparing for me and my family, and I'm not going to allow anybody else to come in and take, any of my supplies. This is it, right? That's good and fine and dandy in your eyes and in your mind, but you have your spouse to be thinking about. Like, are they going to be okay with that? Your kids, are you going to turn Aunt Wanda away from the door when she comes and she's hungry? Are you going to turn, Uncle Joe away? Are you going to turn Grandma away, Grandpa away? Your brothers and sisters, all those, things, when they come to the door and they ask for help. So you might not want to, but you might be stuck doing that because you imagine your kids, being mad and upset with you. It's like, hey, why are you not helping them out? We have plenty. Or your spouse, like, we can't turn away mom, or we can't turn away dad, or we can't turn away your brother or your sister, or my brother or my sister, whatever it might be. So it's really important to think about that and keep that in the back of your mind. I know so many people will say, I'm preparing for myself. I've told my family that they need to prepare. They're not listening. So when it all goes down, too bad for them. Right? So just remember that you're not the only one. You got to live with everybody else in your house. And who knows, how all that stuff is going to go down. So just remember that there's going to be people that you're not going to want to turn your back on, or that when it gets, push comes to shove, that your family is not going to want to turn their back on, which means that you're not going to be able to turn your back on them if your family is not doing that, or it's going to make for a very, very tense situation during this event. So we prep because we love our families. I know of people who talk about, like, I know my kids don't prep, and so I'm prepping for them. I have extra food, extra whatever for them, or I have family members that are not prepping. So I know that I'm not going to be able, my spouse is, I'm not going to be able to turn them away. So I'm prepping for them. And so, they just wind up doing that. So we prep because we love our people. We love our family. And that's part of my opening to every episode, every podcast. And Noah, that was part of it, right? He's like, I have my kids, I have my daughter-in-laws, I have my wife, I have, and I love them. We're going to prep. We're going to do what we need to do. And so it's go time for this. And so he was able to make sure that they survived. Reason number 6, why Noah was a doomsday prepper. Noah's preparation allowed him to survive a catastrophic event and repopulate the earth, right? So even before he started building the ark, Noah knew what building it and going into the ark meant. So God had told him, is like, hey, I want you to build an ark. So when you when you watch the show, and I can't even remember the one with the guy from The Office. I never even watched The Office, but I know that he was on The Office, and he did the one. He did the parody on Noah or whatever. God tells him to build an ark, but he doesn't know what it is. Okay, I'm gonna have to pause the video, and I'm gonna have to go look it up. So because I just can't go on without knowing the name of that one. All right, I'm sure some of y'all are screaming at the podcast like, Todd, it's Steve Carell. All right, so anyway, Steve Carell, he's made a lot of movies, man. Oh my gosh, it was called Evan Almighty, so it was like, take from Bruce Almighty. But God tells him to build an ark, but he doesn't tell him why. That's not the case in Noah's situation. Noah knew that the end of all life was coming. It was truly, the end of the world as he knew it. It was going to wind up happening. So even before he built the ark, he knew that there was going to be like worldwide death. So we might not be preparing for such an event, right? We have it in the back of our minds, the polar shift, the EMP, the nuclear war, the grid going down because of terrorism, all that kind of stuff. We might not be preparing for such an event, but God promised that he wouldn't ever destroy the world with water like he did in Noah's time. All right. And he says that in Genesis 9, verse 11. But we know that things are bad out there. Things could get really bad. We know that there's always those kinds of things. So that's why we prepare for our families for all kinds of events, from all the way up to like, hey, something terrible could happen in the world. Something terrible could happen in our country. Something terrible could happen in the state. And then something terrible can happen in our own lives, right? And so it's really important to remember that a catastrophic event for someone doesn't mean the end of the world for all people, but it might mean the end of the world for them. It could be a medical diagnosis. It could be a job loss and then not being able to find work for a certain amount of time. It could be the loss of someone that's really close and dear to them and kind of rocks their world. And so we prepare for all those different kinds of events on top of all the things that we talk about in the preparedness community. And so we want to make sure that we're able to survive those things, right? We prepare to be able to survive those things and get through them as best as possible. And we might not have all the answers, but being a little bit prepared is going to get us further down the road than not being prepared at all. So it's really important that when we think about what we're doing in our preparedness, it's because we're doing it because we want to get through to the other side. We want to get through and we want to be able to have options. I guess that's one of the best things that you can really consider here is, preparedness gives you options when you might find yourself with very little opportunities. Preparedness gives you those options. And that's what Noah did, right? He gave his family options and then the option to eventually repopulate the earth, right? So the reason number 7, Noah was a doomsday prepper. He had a strong faith in God and followed his instructions, which ultimately led to his survival. Now, Noah believed God, and because of that, he trusted what he said. So whether you're a believer or not, you need someone that you can trust in, that you can help when things look dark. So again, I'm a believer. For me, that is the most important thing. I started prepping because I felt the Lord was leading me to that. And I started talking about prepping because I felt the Lord was leading me to that. I continue talking about prepping because I feel the Lord was doing that. When I sold Prepper website, I thought maybe that was kind of it, and I was like, okay, well, maybe, this is where things are going. But it's really crazy that the person who bought the website didn't want the podcast. Like he didn't want the podcast. And so it was like, okay. And so, what, Lord, what are you telling me here? So I'll continue doing what, I feel I'm supposed to be doing. And I think that's really important there. And that's kind of the driving force with me a lot of the times. So whether you're a believer or not, again, you need someone that you can trust in that can help you when things look dark. The question, you need to be able to keep asking your question. What am I preparing for? Who are we preparing for? Those two questions are very important in your preparedness life. What are we preparing for? Who are we preparing for? Because that right there will get you on the right road. And again, finding someone that you can trust. We talk about this a lot because if you are going it alone, it is really, really hard to find, to keep going. Because eventually you're going to get into a rut and you're going to be able to, things are going to go sideways and you're just like, okay, I don't need this anymore. But when you're able to bounce things off of people, I remember, I think it was Jeff, if you listen to the episode where we talked about it was the exclusive email group and everybody that was on there. One of the things he said, and I never forget it, is that the group really helped him. It really helped him because he was kind of, he was kind of, out there floundering, but it gave him that renewed interest in that rejuvenation in preparedness. And Jeff is a great asset to the exclusive email group. We have a lot of great people who talk and share in the email group who give a lot of great information. And so even if you can't find anyone else, I would say at least do that. Being able to read the emails is very important, but then being able to, and coming online when we do our online meetups every other Tuesday and see people face to face, I think it's really, really beneficial to have that. And so I'm glad that we started that a couple of years back. Reason number 8, why Noah was a doomsday prepper, is he was able to maintain his moral compass and follow God's commandments, even in the face of an apocalyptic event. So Noah didn't let the rain event, the flood, change who he was. And I think that is one of those things that is huge. Many people believe that when the hammer drops, people are going to devolve into a more animalistic version of who they are in the present time. And I think that, I mean, partly that is true. We see times in certain places when there's an absence of law that people, they start looting. People that don't loot every single day, but because of the situation and the event that they're in, they start looting. So, you've heard the line that the fear of getting busted or the fear of law enforcement and getting put in jail keeps some people that normally would be criminals, it keeps them in check, right? There's those that are going to do crime no matter what, right? They don't care. But there's others that are in check because there are police out there. There's law enforcement. There's the possibility of going to jail and all that kind of stuff. So if there wasn't law enforcement, that would go by the wayside. And that is true. If you see in some of the places where law enforcement where they've started defunding the police, right? It's like, let's defund the police. So let's put some counselors in there. Hey, I'm sorry. Hey, while you're looting, can I talk to you about your feelings? No, man, that doesn't work. Right. So, it's really important because when things go sideways, some people are going to go that route. And that's why it's so important to be connected to people that who they are and what they believe, right? So we need to make sure that we are the same people in an SHTF event, or if things are bouncing along nicely. For me, it's my faith in God and in Jesus Christ is the thing that keeps me set, right? But there's other people, whatever your beliefs are, hopefully that keeps you set as well. But there's going to be some people out there that are not. So this has a lot to say about who we are ultimately on the inside and what drives us and what we believe and all those different kinds of things. But I think that's really important there, that Noah was able to keep who he was and that was a driving force of moving forward in the journey. Reason number 9 why Noah is a doomsday prepper is his story serves as a reminder of the importance of preparedness and the consequences of not heeding warnings. Noah took the time to prepare and people lived because of it. Because he took that time, because he listened to God, because he took years building the ark, working in the ark, doing all the crazy things, like I'm sure every time he, the hammer hit his finger, or every time he had to crawl up a space or, whatever it was, I'm sure he's like, oh my gosh, well, really? But he got past all that to prepare, and people lived because of it. So we get to see the warning signs all around us now. Again, if you're not seeing the warning signs, it's because you don't want to, but things are crazy. So do we pay attention to the signs right now? Are you paying attention to the signs, or do you stick your head in the sand? Now, I know that I'm preaching to the choir here because a lot of you that are listening here are people that you're paying attention and things like that. But there's a lot of people who I don't like listening to the news. I don't like knowing what's out there because I can't sleep at night. One of the things that, when I think about Noah and I read the story of Noah, as I go back to what Jesus said about the days of Noah. So in Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 to 39, it says, "For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah." And this is what he's saying about the days of Noah, right? Verse 38, "For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be." I think that's so interesting there, right? So if we can look at the second coming, and the second coming is going to be just like the days of Noah, or the days of Noah, like Noah is preparing. He is going into, he's bringing animals into the ark. He's stocking food. He's stocking water. He's doing all those different kinds of things. He gets in the ark, and God closes the ramp or the door or whatever it is behind him. And people are living life just like normal. Everything is fine. And then boom, it happens. And they didn't realize it until it was too late. And that's the way that we can go to the second coming. That's the way the second coming will be. You're not going to, it's going to hit people, it's going to happen so fast. People aren't going to be prepared for Jesus' second coming. But that's the way that we have situations happen, right? That they just hit you. Like I had been paying attention to COVID that December. Now, some people say, COVID was around, months before, but I had been paying attention to December and January and February. I'd been paying attention to it all then. And then when it went down, it wasn't real news to me because I knew that it was happening. It was still like, oh my gosh, okay, this is really happening. But I had been paying attention to it. I had been prepared for it. So it wasn't kind of like, I'm going about my day and all of a sudden like, oh, hey, we're shutting down the world because of COVID, right? Whether I'm not, just throw aside all the, whether you believe, if it was, a planned thing or not, it's still people were affected by it. So that's the way that it happens. And one of the most important reasons why that we prepare is because there's always something that's out there and we don't want to get caught unprepared. We don't want to get caught, not realizing it. And we don't want to be surprised, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And the last reason that Noah is a doomsday prepper is his actions in the Bible are often cited as models of obedience and faith. So listen, it took years for Noah to go from the time he heard God's word until he entered the ark. And I think this is so important. He didn't get weekly pep talks from God, right? He didn't like, okay, let's have our Zoom call, Noah, or let's have our weekly devotional call, Noah. It's like, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep up the good work. I saw that you put you tarred up the bottom of the ark. You're doing a great job. Keep going. He didn't get any of that. We know that Noah heard from God. And then he heard from God to build it. And then he heard from God to like get in the ark, it's like, it's time to get in the ark. And so, he just obeyed and he was a person of faith. So sometimes for us, the road in preparedness seems long with nothing going on. We hear the like, hey, this is going to happen, but nothing really happens. But when something does happen, it happens fast and with little time to prepare. And guys, that's ultimately why we prep. That's the whole reason for it right there, is that we prep so that when things go down, we're ready. We're not caught off guard like other people will be. Well, guys, that's the 10 reasons why I feel Noah is a doomsday prepper. Listen, I hope you appreciated this one, and I hope you found some real benefit from it. That is going to be it for episode 777. If you found this episode valuable, I would appreciate a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you click the subscribe button in your favorite podcast app. That way you never miss another episode of Sweet Prepper Goodness. And lastly, don't forget to join the email list if you haven't. When you do, I'm going to send you my blackout checklist to know what you should do before, during, and after the lights go out. And with that, choose to live a more self-reliant life. Choose not to be so dependent on the government, grid, or the grind. Until next time, live with no regrets and stay prepped and aware. Peace.